I own a couple of shitty buildings. I rent them to college girls. I don't remember the last male tenant I had that wasn't part of a couple. Most people think that is creepy, which is funny, because I really mean it when I say it. See, I have a deal with the handyman, Dan. Good old Handy Dan. Hates that nickname. We were doing some work on our unit last year and he just had to take the bathroom mirror down for whatever reason while I was in the living room nailing down some trim that had come loose. His startled, "Oh my God," still makes me laugh when I think about it. The cameras I use aren't expensive, but they get the job done. He was real mad at first, standing there, voice shaking, gesticulating at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday in the cold sunbeams falling through a stranger's bathroom, talking police and whatnot. Thank God the tenants were in class or whatever. I gambled big time and said it didn't have to end. He could be in on it. He didn't speak while I explained. Didn't speak when I showed him some of the previously recorded material on my phone. Didn't speak when he turned heel and walked right out of the place. I next saw him 10 minutes later and 3 blocks down in front of my house. Me with my truck door open, an emergency bag in hand, him scratching the back of his neck with a loathsome little sneer on his face. It was a deal. Funny thing, I didn't even have to pay him after that. Not after I told him 2 weeks later that I had hidden the files and flash drives all over his property and he was now inextricably tied to our little operation. I didn't do that, of course, but what the hell. He's a dumb man. Believes what you say when you say it. About a year of this goes by and times are good. He even starts coming over some nights to watch the live feeds with me. Odd at first, but it's a total larf. People are so weird when they think they're alone. Even when it's a slow night, we can pull from the archive and laugh like idiots at 12/16/2014, 3C male slipping and totally eating shit in the shower. Or 11/01/14, 2F brunette fucking her own Halloween date on the couch. She's the sexy nurse, and he's the jolly green giant. It's an irresistible piece of film. I guess we became something like friends during this time. The other week, we've got some showings and this couple wants in. Dan likes to come along and inspect the goods before we sign them up, which actually makes the tenants more comfortable to know I have a dedicated handyman. He's my friend. We both live real close by if there are any problems. Yada yada. But wouldn't you know, this girl is Handy Dan's niece. Handy Dan's fine, blonde niece. The man has straight up begged me to accept blonde girls before. I don't mind, even if I don't like them. The turnover rate is pretty high, this being a college town and all. The fact that it's a couple is even better for obvious reasons. Still, I furtively look at him during the showing to make sure, and he gives me the signal. When he slides into the passenger seat of my truck, he's smiling. He comes over a couple days after they move in, asks me if I've got them fucking yet. I do. It's pretty tame, but there are some good shots. He puts it in his drive and leaves immediately, presumably to rub his greasy little dick about it. That weekend, he comes over again, case of beer in hand. I've already got all the live feeds of everyone who's going home. We settle in. Nothing at all happens for 2 hours. We drink, niece and boyfriend eat dinner, some chicken casserole thing. Looks like shit. Some girl on the first floor talks to someone on the phone for way too long, hangs up, closes the curtains, and masturbates under the covers. Shame. Still a recordable happening. Later on, I was looking through the archives for something, specifically the one where the redhead brings the guy home, and things go well for him until something happens that we aren't sure about. I think he chickens out. Dan thinks he actually shits his pants. It's worth another look. When Dan calls me over to the monitor that's got his niece's bathroom mirror cam on it, boyfriend is just standing there shirtless, his head angled slightly, not blinking, but squinting, like he's unsure of something. He reaches out toward the mirror, his eyes tracing the outside of it. I look at Dan. He looks at me. I gotta say, we're shitting our pants like the poor guy in Redhead's place might have at this point. Sure enough, he grabs the thing and gives it a yank, pulling the small nails out of the top and revealing the alcove that harbors our little amusement machine. Fuck. I look at Dan, and he's leaning. He's got both palms planted at his sides on the couch, ready to spring and run. His eyes the size of dinner plates. I look back to the monitor, and boyfriend is looking about the hole in the wall, but his face isn't right. Not for someone coming across something like this. The corners of his mouth are turned down, his eyebrows are up, and his bottom lip is pushing up into the top one, as if to say, not bad. He picks up the camera, looks into it, and smiles. Dan falls back into the couch, laughing his hyena laugh, while I watch boyfriend replace the camera and the mirror. He looks at it, flashes a thumbs up, and yells over his shoulder. I felt like we won the Super Bowl of hidden cameras. I really did. Best case scenario, right? Just unbelievably lucky. Totally planned on rewarding this kid with any footage he wanted. Even wondered what kind of whiskey he might like. Niece came to boyfriend's call wearing some kind of a silky nighty thing. We actually bumped fists at the sight of her. You believe that? Two old fucks who never got within sniffing distance of a girl like that in their lives. Surreptitiously bumping fists like a couple of goddamn tenants on a munchie run seeing a hot jogger out of the window of a busted up Toyota. On the monitor, boyfriend slid behind her and started kissing her neck. His hands running everywhere they needed to go. He whispered something in her ear and left her standing there, her eyes just as closed as they had been during the kiss. When he returned, his right hand was behind his back, but he took up his position behind her, his left hand sliding into her underwear. She immediately began grinding against it and him, while Dan and I immediately became overjoyed that we had decided to upgrade to our only audio capturing cameras in this place. The good cameras, we called them. It was easily our best video, and we hadn't even seen a tit yet. But then, he stopped and stepped back. We were inches from the screen, stock still, just as they were, standing there. The closest thing to movement was the red recording circle blinking in the bottom corner. We saw his mouth move. We heard what he said. Her eyes opened, centered, and flicked diagonally upward. By the time she saw the hammer, it was already descending. She managed to turn slightly before she caught it flush in the side of the skull, which collapsed, spraying the mirror with all manner of fluid and flesh. The good camera was all too faithful to its task. Her head jerked when he pulled the hammer out. She was crumpling to the ground at the time, which pulled her toward him in a way he didn't seem to expect from how he stumbled backward at the weight of the body hitting his shins. I heard the door open and caught a last glimpse of Dan's shirt as he ran out. Hard to blame him for that. When I looked back at the monitor, boyfriend was still standing there, the dead girl at his feet, pointing the hammer at the camera, smiling, calmly like he just ordered dessert. He gave the tool in his hand a little tomahawk motion, flecking the mirror with yet more vitality, and ran from the bathroom. Before I knew it, I was in my truck, speeding beyond all reason, trusty emergency bag on the passenger seat. I couldn't stop screaming through crying eyes for 30 miles. It doesn't matter where I am now. far, and still looking over my shoulder. More distance to cover still. If you hear about a Hammer murder, tell the cops there's also video in the abandoned apartment nearby. I wonder if Dan ever did pack that emergency bag like I told him to do.
Number 2.
My friend and I always used to walk through a wonderful, spacious park when we were younger. It was full of tall trees, and it was very nicely maintained. In this large park, there was an abandoned mansion. I can't really say how long it had been there, but on that day, the front door of the mansion was wide open. The two of us decided to check out what was inside the place. As we inched through the door, the very first thing we noticed was that the mansion's floor was littered with crumpled up pieces of paper. We looked at each other and observed that there was no furniture, nothing except for those wrinkled balls of paper. The mansion had 6 rooms on its main floor, and every room we entered bore more and more scrunched up pieces of paper. We decided to open up one of the paper balls to see what was inside. Our curiosity got the better of us. I picked up a single wrinkled piece, and as my friend picked up another, I unfolded my paper, smoothing out its bends and dents. At that moment, it was almost as if a piece of rainbow emerged before our eyes, and I was suddenly standing next to a large window in one of the upstairs rooms of the house. I was looking outside into the large park. When I looked down at the piece of paper I held, it read, "Look outside the large window that oversees the park and the upstairs parlor." I dropped the piece of paper, and it fluttered gracefully to the ground. Meanwhile, I stared at my open hands in a bout of horror. Dazed and utterly perplexed, I found my way downstairs and met up with my friend. He was in the kitchen, sitting at a round table that hadn't been there before. Where did this come from? I wondered. My friend stared at his opened paper and reread the words several times before he looked at me and turned the page my way. It said, "Go to the kitchen and sit at the round table." We stared at each other for a few moments, vaguely afraid, but then we began to chuckle. Within seconds, we were laughing our heads off, marveling at our newfound game. We could hardly believe what had happened, but being young as we were, the mystery was endlessly exciting. We decided again to open up another scrunched up piece of paper. As we opened up the crumpled papers on the floor, we experienced the same sudden flash of rainbow colors, but this time, I ended up lying down in the fields behind the mansion. When I peered out onto the paper in my right hand, it read, "Lie down in the fields behind the mansion." I giggled uncontrollably. After a few minutes of running around the house, I found my friend collecting multiple balls of paper in his arms, eager to experience more of these strange, exciting phenomenon. We both got to the gist of what was happening at this point. We had no idea as to how it was possible, but we decided to have more fun with it. The supernatural always had a way of captivating our hearts. After a few more run-throughs with these strange mini teleportation devices, I began to feel apprehensive. I wondered if, at one point, I would be placed somewhere I didn't want to be, or I'd be made to do something that I didn't enjoy. We continued though, minute after minute. We unfolded many papers and traveled through the bedrooms, closets, trees. But then, after having been on the roof of the mansion, I stood before my friend, dead on the living room floor. I didn't scream. I couldn't murder him. I read on my crumpled page as I felt a surge of vomit and bile rising into my throat. Nothing came out, but the sickness in my throat spread to my stomach, my head, and my heart. I didn't know what to do. At this point, I began to scream and shout, praying to God for this to be a nightmare. I wanted it to go away. I wanted to rewind our day and be outside again, together, walking underneath the trees. All I could do was hide his body in a cupboard. I willed myself to be calm, and I hesitantly unfolded another paper in the hopes that the problem would correct itself. Once again, I saw the colors of the rainbow, and I found myself standing behind a tree several meters away from the house. I could clearly see the front door. Within a few instants, I saw both myself and my friend walk through that door. I began to wonder if I had died, or if I was having an out-of-body experience. I looked at the sheet in my hand, and the only words scrawled upon it were, "Time will repeat itself, and a paradox will take place, and it will be allowed." That gave me an idea. In my pocket remained the paper that made me kill my friend. Without looking at it, I crumpled it back up. Quietly, I followed my other self, who had separated from my friend as he explored the rooms of the house. As I crept behind him, he turned around very suddenly. Before he could utter a syllable, I forced the paper in front of his eyes, and in a flash of rainbow colors, I was able to kill my other self. The laws of time allowed me to take over my dead self's place in this world, and also because of the fact that it was allowed to happen, as it was written on the second piece of paper that I had on me, which reversed time. It must have control over time and paradoxes, which made me now the new alive and present of my other dead self. I hid my limp, bleeding other dead self in a cupboard in the upstairs bathroom to rot. To my great relief, I heard my friend call my name from downstairs. My friend managed to stay alive and, well, my best friend. When I went downstairs, he greeted me excitedly, smiling childishly and being blissfully unaware of the situation. I pretended that nothing had happened. In a heartbeat, I told him that the house creeped me out and that it would be much better if we left. After that day, we never went near that mansion again. I don't know if anyone ever saw or heard about anything that happened between us, but I recently heard from another friend that the house had been demolished. And I can tell you with great certainty that while this news is a relief, I dreaded the probable prospect that my corpse was uncovered in the bathroom cabinet.